Hello, classmates. Welcome to International Trade class. Today, we begin to learn the instruments of trade policy. We will discuss the various instruments of trade policy available to government policy makers and their welfare implications. In practice, there are lots of instruments of trade policy, but we mainly focus on tariffs, quotas, and subsidies. This lecture, we will learn what is a tariff and types of tariffs. A tariff is a simple tax levied on a product when it crosses national boundaries. The words tariff, duty, and customers are generally used interchangeably. As the oldest instrument of trade policy, tariffs have been applied in almost every country or region except Hong Kong of China. Tariff rates across the world have been declining in average. In 1948, average tariffs on manufactured goods exceeds 30% in almost developed economies, and it dropped to about 3% now. Through several rounds of negotiations under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and the World Trade Organization, tariffs could be classified into import tariff and export tariff in terms of direction of goods crossing the national boundaries. But the most widespread tariff is the import tariff. That is a tax levied on an imported product. A less common tariff is an export tariff. That is a tax imposed on an exported product. Export tariffs have often been used by developing nations. For example, oil exports have been taxed by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries in order to raise revenues or promote scarcity in global markets, and hence increase the world price. Usually, export duties are imposed on a few resource products and semi-manufactured goods. In 2013, China levied temporary tariffs on exports, including coal, crude oil, chemical fertilizers, and iron alloy, to conserve resources. But it's less common compared with imported tariff. So when we say tariff, it always refers to imported tariff. In terms of purpose of correction, tariffs may be imposed by protection or revenue purpose. A protective tariff is designed to reduce the amount of imports entering a country, thus insulating import competing producers from foreign competition. In the early 19th century, for example, the United Kingdom used the tariffs, the famous coal law, to protect its agriculture from import competition. In the later 19th century, both Germany and the United States protected their new industrial sectors by imposing tariffs on imports of manufactured goods. A revenue tariff is imposed for the purpose for generating tax revenues and may be placed on either exports or imports. For instance, until the introduction of the income tax, the U.S. government raised most of its revenue from tariffs. Over time, tariff revenues have decreased as a source of government revenue for industrial nations. For example, in 19,000, tariff revenues constitute more than 41% of U.S. government recipes. In 2011, the figure stood at about 1.3%. In 1978, tariff revenues constitute about 5.5% of Chinese government recipes. In 2018, the figure stood only 2%. However, some underdeveloped countries currently still rely on tariffs as a sizable source of government revenue because the less developed domestic industry can provide little revenue. In terms of means of correction, tariffs can be specific, adherent, or compound. A specific tariff is expressed in terms of a fixed amount of money per physical unit of the imported product. For example, a Chinese importer of a Japan computer may be required to pay a duty to the Chinese government $100 per computer, regardless of the computer's price. A specific tariff is relatively easy to apply and administer, particularly to standardized commodities and staple products, while the value of the dutiable goods cannot be easily observed. A main disadvantage of a specific tariff is that the degree of protection it offers domestic producers varies inversely with changes in import prices. A specific tariff of $1,000 on autos will discourage imports priced at $20,000 per auto to a greater degree than those priced at $25,000. During times of rising import prices, a given specific tariff loses some of its practical effect. The result is to encourage domestic firms to produce less expensive goods for which the degree of protection against the imports is high. An adherent tariff, much like a sales tax, is expressed as a fixed percentage of the value of the imported product. For example, a 15% tariff is levied on imported automobiles in China if the auto is worth $20,000, so the importer should pay a duty of $3,000 to the government. Adherent tariffs usually lend themselves more satisfactory to manufactured goods because they can be applied to products with a wide range of grade variations. An adherent tariff can distinguish among small differences in product quality to the extent that they are reflected in product price. For example, on the system of adherent tariffs, a person importing a 20,000 Honda would have to pay a higher duty than a person importing 19,900 Toyota. But on the system of specific tariffs, the duty would be the same. Another advantage of an adherent tariff is that it tends to maintain a constant degree of protection for domestic producers during periods of changing prices. In recent decades, in response to global inflation and the rising importance of world trade in manufactured products, adherent duties have been used more often than specific duties. Adherent tariff at first appears to be simple, but in practice, it has suffered from administrative complexities. The main problem has been trying to determine the value of imported product, a process referred as customers' valuation. Import prices are estimated by customers' appraisers, who may disagree on product values. Moreover, import prices tend to fluctuate over time making the valuation process rather difficult. Another customer's valuation problem stems from variations in the method used to determine a commodity's value. For example, the United States has traditionally used the free on board (FOB) valuation, but the European countries have traditionally used a cost insurance freight (CIF) valuation. A compound duty is a combination of specific and ad valorem tariffs. For instance, a U.S. importer of a television might be required to pay a duty of $20 plus 5% of the value of the television. Compound tariffs are often applied to manufactured products embodied raw materials that are subject to tariffs. In this case, the specific portion of the duty neutralizes the cost disadvantage of domestic manufacturers that results from tariff protection granted to domestic suppliers of raw materials. And the ad valorem portion of the duty grants protection to the finished goods industry. In the United States, for instance, there is a compound duty on woven fabrics, 48.5 cents per kilogram plus 38%. The specific portion of the duty, 48.5 cents, compensates the U.S. fabric manufacturers for the tariff protection granted to U.S. cotton producers, while the ad valorem portion of the duty, 38%, provides protection for their own woven fabrics. By now, we have some basic concepts about tariff, but what effects will the tariff have on the importing country and exporting country's prices? We will discuss it in the next lecture.